In the modern theater of war, we place our faith in systems. We believe in the multi-billion-dollar contracts, the fire-and-forget missiles, the automated phalanx and CRAM systems that are supposed to create an impenetrable dome of steel over our soldiers. We trust in the genius of the engineers at Lockheed, at Raytheon, at the defense labs. We trust the flawless, million-line code. But what happens when that code fails? What happens when a $50 million defense system is defeated by a $10,000 drone built in a garage? What happens when the only thing standing between an entire unit and a high-tech missile strike isn't the automated cannon, but one single stubborn specialist with a laptop, a coffee can, and a roll of duct tape? Tonight's story is not about a grand, official billion-dollar program. It's about the exact opposite. It's about a man who was told he was a liability, a man who was ordered, in no uncertain terms, to stick to the manual and stay out of the way. It's about a soldier who saw a problem the multi-million-dollar system couldn't, and who had to violate a dozen regulations to fix it. This is the story of a DIY solution, a junkyard fix that was cobbled together in the dark, against orders, and in total secrecy. And it's the only thing that saved an entire base from annihilation. This is how one soldier's DIY fix saved an entire unit from a missile strike. Before we get boots on the ground, if you believe that the real innovators, the tinkerers, the men in the motor pool and the commo sheds, deserve their spot in history, I need you to secure this channel. First, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It's the only way to ensure you never miss one of these critical reports. Second, smash that like button. It tells the algorithms that this history matters. And finally, drop a comment down below. Let us know what country and city you're watching from. Our community of patriots and history buffs is global, and it is incredible to see. Now, let's go to the wire. My name is Kalen Harris, but for my entire tour I was just scrap. I was a specialist, a 94F computer and detection systems repairer. That's a fancy way of saying that when an infantryman's laptop got too much dust in it, or the Chow Hall satellite TV went on the fritz, they called me. I was assigned to Forward Operating Base Reaper, a tiny, miserable, sun-scorched speck of dirt in eastern Syria. We were a small advise and assist element, mostly Green Berets and a platoon of infantry for security, stuck way out at the end of the world. We weren't there to fight a war. We were there to be a presence, which, as anyone who's been there knows, is a polite way of saying target. We were a small, static, high-value target in a valley surrounded by hills, and those hills were owned, not by disorganized insurgents with AK-47s, but by sophisticated Iranian-backed militias. They weren't fighting with IEDs. They were fighting with technology. They had GPS jamming equipment. They had thermal imagers. And, as we learned on a Tuesday I'll never forget, they had missiles. Or, to be more precise, loitering munitions, suicide drones. The kind you see on the news, the Shahed style. They were cheap, they were plentiful, and they were terrifyingly effective. But we weren't worried, because we had the Sentinel. That's what the contractor called it. A brand new $40 million trailer-mounted CRAM system. It was a beautiful, futuristic white and tan box with a phased array radar and a 20mm Vulcan cannon that was supposed to be fully autonomous. It was our shield. It was our Iron Dome. It was the most expensive, advanced thing on the entire FOB, and we all slept a little better knowing that it was, as the manual said, providing a 99% effective countermeasure against all low-level air threats. That 1% arrived at 14:30. The alarm was a high, thin, electronic beep, beep, beep that cut right through the diesel and dust haze of the afternoon. Incoming, 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 bunkers! The practiced, bored voice of the TOC operator crackled over the camp-wide speakers. I was in my workshop, a windowless, steel Connex box that smelled like hot metal and ozone, trying to fix a faulty radio handset. I dropped it and ran, just like everyone else, heading for the concrete blast bunker. As I ran, I looked over at the Sentinel. It was working. It was online. I heard its hydraulic whine as the radar turret spun. I heard the clunk as the 20mm cannon pointed straight up, unlocked its travel stays. It was scanning. It was hunting. We all piled into the bunker, a hot, dark concrete box that smelled like sweat and damp earth. We waited. The drill was simple. We hear the alarm. We hear the brrr-tee of the sentinel firing. We wait for the secondary pop of the drone exploding, and then we go back to work. We waited. The bunker was silent. No brrrt. What the hell? A sergeant from the infantry platoon muttered, "Where's the gun?" And then we heard it. It wasn't a whistle. It was a hiss. A low, terrifying hiss like a giant propane leak getting louder. "Incoming!" someone screamed, as if it wasn't obvious. We all tucked, hands over our heads, and the world just ended. A whump crump that was so powerful it wasn't a sound. It was a force. It punched the air out of my lungs. The ground heaved, throwing me off my feet, and the concrete walls of the bunker shook, raining dust and pebbles down on us. Then a second, sharper explosion. Crack. And a third. Crack, boom. Secondary explosions. We all knew what that meant. It had hit the ammo dump. When the all clear finally came, we climbed out into a world of black, acrid smoke. The Sentinel was fine, sitting there, untouched, its radar still spinning uselessly, like an idiot. But the ammo dump, 100 meters away, was a raging inferno. We'd lost half our mortar rounds and all of our medical supplies, which had been stored nearby. It was a devastating, crippling blow. I watched our new executive officer, First Lieutenant Darrow, tear into the civilian contractor who ran the Sentinel. Darrow was a new kind of officer, straight from West Point, a systems management degree, a man who believed in data and regulations. He didn't see the world in soldiers, he saw it in assets and protocols. "Your 99.9% system just failed, Mr. Clark." Darrow was screaming, his face purple. Why did it fail? The contractor, a pale, sweating man, just stammered, "I don't know, sir. The log is... It's confused. The radar acquired 16 targets, sir. 16 bogies all moving erratically. The system couldn't achieve a stable enough lock on any one of them." It was a logic loop. It didn't know which one to shoot. I stood there listening, and something clicked in my head. 16 targets. I knew this valley. I knew those hills. I looked over at the wadi, the dry riverbed that snaked its way up to our eastern perimeter. It was a deep, narrow canyon. I wasn't a radar tech, not really, but I was a tinkerer. I was scrap because I collected junk. My dad was a ham radio operator. I knew. Signals. I walked, almost in a daze, past Darrow, past the infantry guys, and into the tuck. I went to the commo tent and found the raw data feed from the Sentinel's radar. And there it was. It wasn't 16 drones. It was one drone. The drone had flown low, deep inside the wadi. And the Sentinel, with its incredibly powerful, incredibly smart radar, had been fooled. Its signal was bouncing off the canyon walls. The signal arriving back at the receiver at a dozen different but similar times. It was multipath interference. The radar was seeing ghosts. The $50 million system was too stupid to know the difference between a real target and an echo. It was a digital, high-tech, multi-million-dollar failure. The enemy had used a $10,000 drone and a canyon to defeat our impenetrable shield. I went back to my Connex. My brain was on fire. I just knew. Darrow's solution would be file a report and request a software patch, which would take 6 months. We didn't have 6 months. We had maybe 6 hours before the next one came. How do you find a single, low-flying drone in a canyon full of ghosts? You don't. You don't look for it. You listen for it. That drone. It wasn't autonomous. Not that autonomous. To fly that low, that precise, it was getting a signal. It was either being actively controlled by a line-of-sight RC radio, or it was getting simple GPS updates from a commercial chip. Either way, it was talking. It was receiving a signal. And if it was receiving, I could hear it. I didn't need a high-power, active pinging radar. I needed a low-power, passive listener. I started tearing my Connex apart. I wasn't just scrap by name. I had boxes of junk. I had broken hard drives, old satellite phone parts, a ham radio set I'd built myself. I found what I needed. A $30 software-defined radio, SDR dongle I'd ordered online. A high-gain antenna I'd built last month out of a Folgers coffee can and a piece of copper wire, just because I was bored. And an old, broken Panasonic Toughbook laptop that was supposed to be turned in for destruction. I pulled the power supply from a broken Xbox in the MWR tent, spliced the wires, and got the laptop to boot. I installed a piece of open-source, public domain signal analysis software. I had created a monster, a non-standard, unvetted, illegal Frankenstein of a listening post. I hooked up my cantenna, pointed it at the wadi, and hit scan. The screen exploded in a waterfall of radio frequency noise. Static, but somewhere in there, somewhere in that noise, was the signal. I just had to find it. I was in the zone, soldering a better connector, when the Connex door was kicked open, flooding the dark box with blinding white sunlight. "Specialist Harris." Lieutenant Darrow's voice was like a whip crack. He stormed in, his eyes taking in my workbench, the wires, the coffee can, the running, non-approved laptop. His face went from angry to disgusted. "What in the hell is that? You are running an unsecured, unvetted piece of hobbyist junk on my firebase, Specialist. You are a security risk. You are a liability. You are a one-man intelligence leak waiting to happen." I tried to explain. "Sir, it's a passive receiver. It's not transmitting. I think I can find the drone's control frequency. I can hear it before the radar even sees it. I can give us an early—" "You will give us nothing," Darrow snarled, his hand on his sidearm as if I were an enemy. "You will shut it down. You will disassemble this mess. You are a 94F. Your job is to fix the approved equipment. Your job is not to invent new broken equipment. Am I clear? You are a liability, Harris. Just stay out of the way. Let the real systems and the real engineers do their jobs." He kicked the coffee can antenna, knocking it off the table. "I want this junk destroyed by 18:00 hours. That's an order." He stormed out. I stood there in the sudden silence, my heart pounding. I was humiliated, I was furious, and I was terrified, because I knew he was wrong, and I knew the drone was coming back. I looked at the coffee can on the floor, I looked at the laptop, and I made a decision. I picked it up, and I didn't destroy it. I hid it. Hiding the system was one thing. Using it was another. The 1800 deadline hung over my head like a guillotine. Darrow was an XO, which meant his entire job was to walk around with a clipboard and make sure people were doing what they were supposed to be doing. My Connex was no longer safe. He'd be back. He'd inspect to make sure I had complied with his direct order. I was now a criminal, a rogue asset on my own base. I felt a hot, prickling shame, but beneath it, a cold, hard certainty that felt like a block of ice in my gut. I was right. They were wrong, and that was the only thing that mattered. I did what I was told for a while. I went to the motor pool and spent an hour helping the contractor, Mr. Clark, and 2 other techs recalibrate the Sentinel. It was a perfect, agonizing display of bureaucratic incompetence. Darrow was there, supervising, which meant he was standing too close, radiating a field of nervous, by-the-book energy. "We are initiating a full-spectrum diagnostic, Lieutenant," Clark said, his fingers tapping on a ruggedized laptop that was plugged directly into the C-RAM's brain. "And I've spoken with the manufacturer. They're pushing a new logic filter patch. It'll increase the target discrimination threshold. It will filter out 90% of all false positive ghost signals." He sounded so proud. I just stood there holding a wrench, my knuckles white. "A filter?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. Darrow's head snapped toward me. "Is there a problem, Specialist Harris?" I felt my face flush. "Sir, a filter isn't a fix. It's just ignoring data. They're just telling the system to ignore any signal that isn't clean enough. What happens when the real drone flies into the wadi and its signal looks like a ghost? The filter will ignore it. You're blinding it. Darrow's eyes narrowed to slits. Specialist, I have a $40 million system, a certified engineer, and a direct line to the Pentagon's top cyber defense contractors, all of whom are working on this. And you? A 94F with a coffee can. Think you know better? He pointed a rigid finger at me. Your job here is to hold the flashlight, to hand Mr. Clark the tools he asks for, and to keep your mouth shut. You are one step away from a court-martial, Harris. Do not for 1 second think I am joking. Stay out of the way. The humiliation was a physical thing. It burned. The other techs wouldn't even look at me. I was the base pariah, the crazy guy, the liability. I just nodded. Yes, sir. I spent the next 2 hours in that scorching 120-degree heat, handing Clark zip ties and listening to him and Darrow talk about optimizing the firmware and realigning the sensor suite. It was all useless. They were polishing a hammer, thinking it would turn into a screwdriver. They were treating the symptom, the ghost signals, and not the disease. The fact that the enemy was smarter than their smart weapon. At 17:30, Darrow dismissed me. Go secure your workshop, specialist. I'll be by at 18:30 for a final inspection to confirm compliance. It was a threat and a timeline. I had 1 hour. I ran. I didn't go to my Connex. I grabbed my go bag, which already had the laptop, the SDR, and the cantenna hidden inside. I had to find a new nest, a place with power, a place with a view of the Wadi, and a place where no one would ever think to look for me. The generator shack. It was perfect. It was a sandbagged, concrete bunker on the north perimeter, housing the 2 massive 1-megawatt diesel generators that kept the FOB alive. It was the loudest place on the entire base, a constant, earth-shaking thump, thump, thump that you could feel in your teeth 50 yards away. And, crucially, it had a high, west-facing vent, covered in mesh, that looked directly at the mouth of the Wadi. And no one, ever, went in there, except the generator mechanics, who were known for being cranky, half-deaf, and not giving a damn about anything that wasn't covered in oil. I slipped in. The noise was a physical blow, a wall of sound that made my eardrums vibrate. It was glorious. It was the perfect acoustic cover. In the back, between 2 55-gallon drums of lubricating oil, was a workbench. It had a single, flickering fluorescent light, and most importantly, a 110V outlet. I was in business. I assembled my system, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from a frantic, hunted energy. I plugged in the laptop, the old Toughbook Word to life. I plugged in the SDR dongle. I ran the coax cable up to the vent, and using a fistful of 100-mile-an-hour tape, I secured my Folgers cantenna to the mesh, aiming it directly at the dark, shadowed maw of the Wadi, which was now turning a deep purple as the sun began to set. I sat down on an overturned bucket, put on a pair of noise-canceling headphones I'd salvaged, and booted the software. The waterfall display on the laptop screen lit up. It was a river of electronic noise. The generators themselves were creating a massive, dirty field of RF interference, a blizzard of static that I had to filter out first. I spent 20 minutes setting the noise floor, telling the software to ignore the massive constant spike of the generators. Filter, filter, filter. The waterfall turned from a whiteout blizzard to a dark, clean, electronic blue river. Now, I could see. Now, I could listen. The clock on the laptop read 17:55. Darrow was just 35 minutes from inspecting my Connex and finding it clean. I'd bought myself a few hours at most. I had to find this thing. I wasn't scanning all the frequencies. I had a hunch. These drones. They weren't military grade. They were commercial grade, repurposed. They used off-the-shelf radio control chips or simple 4G LTE modems. I focused my scan on the common RC bands and the local, unsecured cellular data frequencies. I was hunting for a specific kind of signal. Not a voice. Not a data stream. I was looking for a handshake. A short digital M-burst transmission. The kind of signal a controller sends to a drone to say, "You still there?" And the drone replies, "Still here." It's a digital heartbeat. I scanned. For an hour, I saw nothing but the random static of the universe and the occasional legitimate burst of one of our own encrypted SyncGAR's radio checks. 18:30 passed. I pictured Darrow in my Connex, shining his flashlight on my empty, clean workbench, a smug, satisfied look on his face. The liability has been contained. Good. Let him think that. The generator shack grew hotter, the air thick with the smell of diesel exhaust and hot oil. The constant thrumming vibration of the floor was making my vision blur. 19, 0, 19, 30, 20, 0. The sun was long gone. The base was now lit by harsh yellow floodlights. This was the time. The attack had come in the afternoon, but the real attacks, the ones designed to kill, always came in the dark. 20:15. There, a flicker. So fast I thought I'd imagined it. On the 915 MHz band, a frequency commonly used by long-range RC controllers. It was a tiny, sharp, vertical line of bright yellow on my blue waterfall. It lasted for less than half a second, then vanished. A burst handshake. It was him. He was out there. He was in those hills. And he was pinging his drone, getting it ready. I felt my skin go cold. I saved the frequency, my fingers flying. I isolated it, filtering out everything else. My screen was now black, just waiting for that one single yellow line. 20, 30, it came again. Bip. 20, 32, bip. He was checking his link. He was getting his bird ready to fly. This was it. This was the proof. This was the early warning system. I had minutes. They had seconds. But then, the problem. The one I hadn't solved. I'm a mechanic in a generator shack. The Sentinel is a $50 million black box, 100 yards away, sitting in its own high-tech trailer. It was run by a contractor who hated me, and commanded by a lieutenant who thought I was a criminal. I couldn't talk to it. The system had no audio-in jack. I couldn't plug my coffee can into a nuclear-powered death robot. There was no protocol for this. I couldn't just call the TOC. What would I say? Sir, disregard your multi-million-dollar asset. The coffee can in the generator shack just beeped. Darrow would have me in leg irons. I was stuck. I was a prophet of a doom I could see, but couldn't stop. I was trapped in my own, useless, brilliant solution. I was paralyzed, my mind racing, trying to figure out a way. How do I force them to listen? Do I pull the fire alarm? Do I shoot my rifle in the air? I was running through insane, court-martialable scenarios. And then, at 20:41, the problem got worse. The TOC's all-call speaker, which was mounted right outside the gen shack, crackled to life. It was Darrow's voice, smooth, confident, and utterly, terrifyingly wrong. Attention on the FOB, this is the XO. Good news. Mr. Clark and his team have successfully patched the Sentinel. The new logic filters are online. The system is recalibrated 100% and green-lit. We are fully mission-capable. Sleep well. A few hoo-ahs echoed from the infantry bunkers. A false, fatal sense of security settled over the base. They were sleeping. They were trusting the patch. And as they did, at 20:42, my screen lit up. The handshake signal, the BIP, stopped, and in its place a new signal appeared, a solid, continuous, bright yellow line. It was no longer a handshake. It was a live feed. It was the drone's high-bandwidth video transmitter, sending a signal back to its operator. It was awake. It was in the air. It was in the wadi, right below the radar, and it was hunting. And I was the only person in the world who knew. I was paralyzed. For a full agonizing 10 seconds, my brain just stopped. They were sleeping. They were trusting the patch. They were trusting Darrow. And in the laptop screen, I saw the solid, unwavering yellow line that represented a live flying hunting machine, a machine that Darrow's fix had just made invisible. I was the only person on a base of 200 men who knew that death was in the air. I had to do something. My first instinct was to run, to sprint to the TOC, to tackle the operator and grab the all-call microphone myself. But I knew what would happen. The MP at the door would tase me. Darrow would have me in flex cuffs before I could get 3 words out. "Sir, the coffee can, it's real." I'd be a lunatic, a criminal, and while they were arresting me, the drone would hit. I was a 94F. I was a repairman. I was a systems guy. I wasn't a hero. I was a liability. And as I stared at the wall of the generator shack, at the thick black 50-pair trunk cable that fed the base's internal phone and PA system, a new, insane, and utterly illegal idea began to form. Darrow had told me to fix the approved equipment. Okay, I would. I just wouldn't ask first. My hands, which had been shaking, were suddenly, unnervingly, still. I grabbed my tool bag. I pulled out my TS-21 butt set, a telephone repairman's handset. But it was too slow. I needed to talk, not dial. I grabbed the other handset, the broken one I'd been fixing when the first attack happened. The one with the simple push-to-talk, PTT button. I took my wire strippers and, in one violent, career-ending motion, I cut the PA system trunk line. This was it. No going back. I had just, in effect, cut the Tosi's vocal cords. I could hear in the distance the faint, confused click of the all-clear signal turning off, a signal I had just severed. I stripped the audio pair wires, the green and red ones, with a speed I didn't know I possessed. My hands were a blur of copper and plastic. My laptop screen was still my only eye. The yellow line was changing. It was pulsing. The signal strength was fluctuating. It's moving, I thought. It's not just hovering, it's turning. My blood went cold. My SDR software had a demodulator function, a simple one. I clicked it. I tuned it. I was trying to see what the signal was carrying. It was a long shot. Unless it was cheap, unless it was unencrypted. The screen flickered. The blue waterfall of data was replaced by a grainy, black and white image. Static. Then a picture. A horrible, green-tinted night vision picture. I was looking at myself. No, not me. I was looking at the base. From the air. I was seeing what the drone was seeing. I was watching my own death. The feed was shaky. The drone was low, skimming the top of the Wadi wall just as I'd predicted. I could see the perimeter fence. I could see the glow of the floodlights. The Sentinel, 100 yards away, was silent, its radar spinning, blind and useless, its logic filter working perfectly, filtering out the dirty signal from the canyon. The drone was invisible, and it was banking. It was lining up. It wasn't aiming for the ammo dump this time. It wasn't aiming for the empty patch of dirt. I watched in pure, cold, liquid terror as the crosshairs on the drone's feed centered, then centered again, on the long, low, sandbagged shape of the Green Beret barracks. The building where 30 men were sleeping, trusting Darrow's fix. This wasn't a harassment attack. This was a decapitation strike. My laptop screen was a 60-second countdown to a massacre. I took the bare wires from my PTT handset. I jammed them against the copper terminals of the trunk line I had just cut. I was hot-splicing the entire FOB's PA system to a broken radio handset. I took a deep breath, the smell of diesel and ozone burning my lungs. I looked at the laptop screen. The barracks roof was getting bigger. The drone was pitching down. It was on its final terminal dive. 10 seconds. I pressed the push-to-talk button, and I screamed. I didn't say incoming. I didn't say drone or missile. I didn't try to explain. I used the one single lizard brain word that every soldier, from a private to a general, is trained to obey without question. Bunker, 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 now! My own voice, amplified 1,000 times, screamed from the loudspeaker just outside the generator shack. It was a sound of such raw, distorted electronic panic that it was inhuman. It was the sound of the base's own soul screaming in terror. It echoed, a giant, terrifying wall of sound, across the entire compound. I kept my thumb on the button, screaming the word, over and over, my throat shredding. On the laptop screen, I saw it. The proof. A light inside the barracks flicked on. A door was thrown open. I saw a single confused, sleepy figure, a man in shorts, stumble out onto the porch, his head tilted, confused. Just as my voice was screaming, "Bunker now!" He dove. He dove off the porch a split second before the world went white. The laptop screen dissolved into static. I dropped the handset and threw myself under the steel workbench, my hands clamped over my helmet. The whump boom was not a sound. It was a physical blow. It felt like the generator shack had been punched by God. The concrete floor leapt under my chest, slamming me against the workbench. The fluorescent light above me exploded in a rain of glass and sparks. The air was sucked from my lungs, then slammed back in, full of pulverized concrete and the taste of burning electronics. The two massive generators, the heart of the base, let out a high-pitched, dying whine as their intakes were starved of air. And then, with a final, shuddering clunk, they died. The base was plunged into total, absolute ringing darkness. The only sound was the high-pitched scree in my own ears, and then the other sound, the sound of men, hundreds of men screaming in the dark. I lay there, in the total, suffocating darkness, for a second that lasted 1,000 years. My world was just the scree in my ears and the thudding of my own heart against the concrete floor. The air was unbreathable, a toxic cocktail of pulverized concrete dust, diesel fumes, vaporized electronics, and the sudden sick, coppery smell of blood. The generators were dead. I was deaf, I was blind, and I was alive. My army crawled out from under the workbench, my hands slicing open on the shards of the exploded fluorescent light. I was choking, gagging on the dust. My laptop, my beautiful, illegal Frankenstein's monster of a laptop, was gone. The workbench it had been on was a twisted, smoking ruin, the force of the blast having ripped through the vent and turned my little nest into a shrapnel-filled death box. I was alive by sheer dumb luck. I had to get out. I stumbled toward the door, my legs like jelly, and fell out into the night. The fob was gone. The familiar yellow-lit, orderly world of Reaper had been replaced by a vision from hell. There was no power, no lights. The only light on the entire base was a single, massive, roaring pillar of fire, a 50-foot-tall torch that was greedily, hungrily, joyfully consuming the Green Beret barracks. The sound was a deafening, constant whoosh of a blast furnace, punctuated by the sharp whip-crack, pop-pop-pop of small arms ammunition cooking off inside. Shouts, screams. Men were running towards the fire, their dark silhouettes stark against the flames. They were shadows, running into hell. Medics, infantrymen, guys from the motor pool, all sprinting with fire extinguishers and stretchers. And then I saw them, the survivors. They weren't bodies being pulled from a collapsed morgue. They were men. They were wounded. They were dazed. They were bloody. They were burned. But they were alive. I saw a man, the one from the porch, being dragged by two others, his leg a ruin, but he was screaming, which meant he was breathing. I saw two more stumble out of the main doorway, their clothes on fire, and a half-dozen men tackled them, rolling them in the dirt to put them out. They were alive. They had been sleeping. They should have been vaporized. They should have been meat, trapped in their racks, annihilated in that first, unsuspecting second. But they weren't. They had been in the central hallway. They had been diving for the floor. They had been moving. My voice, my stupid, panicked, illegal, regulation-destroying scream. It had given them the 2 seconds they needed. It was the difference between wounded in action and killed in action. The drone had still hit, it had still won, but it hadn't killed, not all of them, not like it was supposed to. I felt a wave of dizzy, nauseating relief that was so powerful my knees buckled, and I fell to the ground vomiting. It was in that moment, on my hands and knees, that the emergency lights kicked on. A few harsh, red, battery-powered battle lights clicked on, casting the scene in a demonic, bloody glow. And in that red light I saw him, Lieutenant Darrow. He wasn't running towards the fire. He wasn't helping the wounded. He was standing, perfectly still, 20 feet away, his chest heaving. His face was a mask of chalk-white, uncomprehending rage. And he was not alone. He was flanked by 2 massive MPs, their hands on their sidearms. They weren't looking at the burning barracks. They were looking at me. Harris. Darrow's voice was a low, shaking hiss, barely audible over the roaring fire and the screams of the wounded. He took a step towards me, his eyes flitting past me, into the dark, ruined generator shack. He saw it all. The severed smoking trunk line hanging from the wall, the overturned workbench, the fried sparking remnants of my junk. He understood exactly what I had done. I hadn't just warned the base. I had hijacked it. I had cut his comms. I had, in his mind, caused this panic. I had violated a dozen articles of the UCMJ. You, he whispered, his voice trembling, you did this? He wasn't talking about the warning. He was talking about the chaos. He was convinced that my unsecured transmission, my rogue system, had somehow interfered, had caused the attack, had blocked the Sentinel. In his world of perfect, clean protocols, my dirty DIY fix was the problem. It had to be. You cut the base-wide PA, he said, his voice rising, in the middle of a false alarm. It wasn't false, I screamed back, my voice shredding, my throat raw. I got to my feet, my whole body shaking. I was covered in vomit and concrete dust. I saw it, sir. I saw the video feed. It was aiming for the barracks. Your patch didn't work. It was blind. I warned them. Warned them? Darrow shrieked, his professionalism finally, completely shattering. You caused a panic. You interfered with a multi-million-dollar defense system. You are a liability, Harris. You're a criminal. He turned to the MPs. Arrest him. He's compromised base security. He's a saboteur. Arrest him. Now. The two MPs, big men who had been watching the fire, now turned their full attention to me. They saw a specialist, covered in filth, raving like a lunatic, and a lieutenant giving a direct order. They unsnapped their holsters. They started to move. This was it. I was going to be arrested for saving them. My life was over. Like hell, you will. The voice was not a shout. It was a growl. It was a low, guttural, angry sound that cut through the chaos like a cannon shot. A shadow detached itself from the firelight. A man walking towards us. He was tall, covered from head to toe in black soot and white fire extinguisher foam. His helmet was gone, his uniform was shredded, and his left arm was wrapped in a bloody, makeshift tourniquet. It was Captain Thorne, the Green Beret commander, the man who had been sleeping in that barracks, the man whose life I had just saved. He didn't look at Darrow. He looked at me. He looked at the smoking generator shack, and at the cut wires, and then back at me. He didn't understand what I'd done, but he understood that I'd done it. Lieutenant, Thorne said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He never called Darrow sir. My barracks is on fire. I have 12 wounded men, and I have 0 dead ones. He pointed a bloody, shaking finger at me. I don't know who this kid is or what he did, but I know that his voice, that screaming, is the only reason my men aren't being scraped off the walls in body bags. Your Sentinel was silent. Darrow was speechless. Captain, this specialist he's a rogue element. He warned us. Thorne cut him off, his voice like gravel, which is more than your goddamn toy did. He turned to the MPs. You two, go help with the wounded. Now. The MPs looked at the captain, then at the lieutenant. They saw a man who had just walked out of a fire, and a man who hadn't. They nodded. Yes, Captain. And they ran, disappearing into the smoke. Darrow was left alone, sputtering, his authority gone, vaporized in the same fire that had taken the barracks. Thorne turned back to me, his eyes hard as diamonds. I don't know what you are, specialist, he said, but you're coming with me. We have another one of those things to kill. And you, he said, looking at my ruined workbench, are the only one who can see them coming. My world was compressed to a single burning point. It was me, Captain Thorne, and the roaring, infernal 50-foot pillar of flame that had been his barracks. The chaos was absolute. Men were screaming, running with hoses that were spitting useless, feeble streams of water. Medics were performing triage in the hellish red light of the emergency battle lights, their forms like demons tending to the damned. And in the middle of it all stood Lieutenant Darrow, a man whose entire ordered digital world had just been slagged into molten steel. His face was a mask of pure, uncomprehending, white-hot rage. He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing, his brain caught in a logic loop of its own. Specialist Harris, unauthorized system, security breach, PA system hijacked, catastrophic attack, file report, file report. He was a broken machine, and Captain Thorne, a man made of pure, raw, bleeding-edge reality, had no time for broken machines. "You," Thorne said to me, his voice a low growl that cut through the roar of the fire, "are coming with me." He didn't wait for an answer. He grabbed my arm, his good one, with a grip of such compressed, painful strength that he nearly lifted me off the ground. He started walking, dragging me, a 150-pound piece of evidence, away from the generator shack and towards the one building that was still intact, the concrete heart of the base, the TOS. Darrow found his voice. It was a high, thin, reedy shriek of pure, panicked protocol. "Captain! Captain! That man is under arrest. He is a saboteur. He compromised the comms trunk. He's a liability." Thorne didn't stop. He didn't even look back. He just threw his response over his shoulder, his words like chunks of shrapnel. "He's the only goddamn system that worked it, Lieutenant. My men are wounded, not dead, because of his voice, not your green-lit toy. So you have a choice. You can either go brief the colonel and explain how your multi-million-dollar patch failed to see a drone that was videotaping us, or you can grab a fire extinguisher and make yourself useful. But what you will not do is get in my way." It was a total, complete, and brutal evisceration. Darrow just stopped. He froze, his mouth open, humiliated in front of the MPs, the medics, and the entire smoking ruin of his authority. He had just been told by a man who was actually bleeding for this base to stay out of the way. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Thorne dragged me through the blast door of the TOC. The scene inside was chaos. The power loss had thrown them into confusion. Men were running, yelling, trying to get the backup generators online. The comm sergeant was frantically trying to figure out why his PA system was dead. "It's him!" he yelled, pointing at me as I was dragged in. "He cut the trunk line." "Shut up," Thorne barked. "You, Harris, what did you do?" He threw me into a chair at the main comms station, the one with the direct line to the all-call. "Talk, now, 2 minutes. What did you see?" I told him. The words came tumbling out, a frantic, high-speed data dump of the last 6 hours. The wadi, the multipath ghosts, the coffee can, the laptop, the burst transmissions, the live video feed, the barracks, the crosshairs. As I spoke, the room, which had been frantic, went dead silent. The comms sergeant, the Tausi operators, even the infantry platoon leader who had just run in. They all just stared at me. I sounded like a maniac, a raving, paranoid, tech-obsessed lunatic. I was admitting to a dozen crimes. I was waiting for Thorne to be the one to finally put the handcuffs on me. When I finished, the TOC was silent, save for the crackle of the radios and the distant muffled roar of the fire outside. Thorne stared at me, his one good eye, the other swollen and caked in blood and soot, unblinking. "You saw it," he said. It wasn't a question. "You saw the video feed from the drone, on your laptop." "Yes, Captain," I whispered, my throat raw. "I did. It was." It was unencrypted. Just a raw, commercial, analog video feed riding on top of the digital control signal. Thorne closed his eye. He let out a long, slow breath that smelled of smoke and pain. Then he turned to the comm sergeant. "Sergeant," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "I want a new laptop, a power supply, and a direct, hardwired audio line from this station right here to the all-call PA system and to the main channel of the Sentinel's comm console. I want it done in 5 minutes." The sergeant just stared. "But, sir, that's not a standard protocol. The Sentinel is a black box system. Do I look, Thorne growled, leaning in, his bloody arm dripping on the console, like I give a single solitary damn about protocol right now? My men are on fire. That thing is still out there, and this liability is the only one who can see it. You will give him whatever he asks for. You will build a protocol, or I will find someone who can. Are we clear? Yes, Captain, the sergeant yelped, and he flew to a supply closet, tearing out wires, a new laptop, and a power strip. He was a 94F, just like me. He understood. He was just one who had been too scared to break the rules. Now he had orders. In 10 minutes, my junk was no longer junk. It was Station Charlie. It was a brand new high-speed laptop plugged into the base's emergency power, which had just kicked on. My SDR dongle was plugged into its USB port, and my beautiful, ugly, bullet-riddled Folgers Cantenna, which I'd run back to the Gen Shack to retrieve, was now officially mounted on the roof of the TOC, secured by a roll of 100-mile-an-hour tape and aimed, like a holy relic, at the Wadi. The comm sergeant had, with a look of terrified, giddy genius, hot-spliced an audio outline from the laptop and piggybacked it to the PA system's main feed and to the contractor's comm console. I now had 2 red buttons, one for the all call and one to talk directly to Mr. Clark, who was at that very moment being escorted by 2 of Thorne's Green Berets from his bunker to the Sentinel's control trailer. The dynamic had shifted. The liability was now the early warning system. I was the real radar. The Sentinel was just the gun. And Mr. Clark was about to become my gunner. Harris, Thorne said, his voice low. He was sitting in the commander's chair, a medic pumping him full of morphine, but his eyes were still clear. I don't know what magic box voodoo you do. I don't care. Your only job for the rest of your natural-born life is to sit right there and watch that screen. You see a ghost? You call it. You see a flicker? You call it. You have a bad feeling? You call it. I will never doubt your voice again, and I promise you, they will be back. He was right. The rest of the night was a long, cold vigil. The wounded were medevaced. The fire was eventually contained, leaving a smoking black skeletal ruin where the barracks had been. The final count was 14 wounded, 3 of them critical, but 0 dead. A miracle, they called it. Darrow was nowhere to be seen. He had been retasked, as Thorne put it, to supervise the perimeter integrity investigation on the opposite side of the base. He was in exile. I sat there, my headphones on, my eyes burning, just watching the blue waterfall. The generators had been partially repaired. Their thump-thump, a welcome, comforting heartbeat. I was no longer in the noise. I was in the signal. At Elmore 4:30, just before the first hint of dawn, when the base was at its lowest, most vulnerable ebb. It happened. Beep, the same frequency, 9:15 MHz. A tiny yellow razor-thin line. A handshake. "TOC, this is Harris," I said, my voice low, professional, unrecognizable from the scream I'd unleashed hours before. "I have a ping, bearing 280. He's back." The TOC, which had been a quiet murmur of activity, went dead silent. Thorne, who had been asleep in his chair, was instantly awake, his eyes on me. "Mr. Clark," I said, my thumb hitting the second red button. "This is Harris. Are you at your station?" The reply was a shaky, terrified, static-filled voice. Yes, specialist, I'm here. The system it's green, but the patch is still on. I'm blind." "I know," I said. "I'm your eyes. Stand by for a fire mission." I looked at my screen. The bip stopped, and the solid yellow line appeared. "He's airborne," I said, my voice cold. "I have a live feed lock. He's in the Wadi. He's moving fast, demodulating. Now." The blue waterfall was replaced by the same grainy green and black video feed. My heart hammered. He was coming. He was coming back. But this time, he wasn't going for the barracks. He wasn't going for the ammo dump. He was banking, turning. The crosshairs were settling on the one, single, high-value target that was lit up by our own emergency lights. The talk, he was coming. For us. He's on final, I yelled. He's coming for us. Clark, slew your gun. Bearing 285, 285, now. He's at 100 meters and closing. I can't see it, Specialist. Clark shrieked, his voice cracking with panic. The logic filter. It's blocking it. It's a dirty signal. I can't get a lock. I am your lock, I roared, the authority coming from a place I didn't know I had. I am ordering you. Switch to manual. Override the goddamn logic. I am the sensor. Slew 285. Fire when I tell you. I watched the grainy feed. The talk was getting bigger. 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 He's at 500 meters. Clark, fire. Fire now. There was a half-second of agonizing silence. A half-second where my entire insane DIY fix was about to fail. And then, the night exploded. A sound so profound, so violent, that it shook the teeth in my skull. The brrrrt of the Sentinel's 20mm Vulcan cannon, unleashed not by a smart computer, but by a man, in a panic, obeying a voice. It was a stream of 4.00 rounds per minute of high-explosive incendiary tracers, a solid, white-hot laser beam of rage, cutting through the dark, right where I had told him to look. On my laptop screen, the grainy green and black video feed vanished. It didn't just turn to static. It ended. A fraction of a second later, a brilliant, beautiful secondary flash lit up the entire wadi. A white-orange fireball that illuminated the hills for miles. A crump followed, echoing across the base, dead. I sat back in my chair, my entire body shaking, my headphones still on. The talk was silent. Captain Thorne, his arm in a sling, just stared at me, a long, unblinking stare. He then looked at the talk sergeant. Get Specialist Harris a new coffee can, a bigger one, and get him a real antenna. He turned back to me. And Harris, you're relieved. Go get some chow. You're back on duty at 18. EY0. You're the only one I trust to watch the wire tonight. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I had been a liability. I had been told to stay out of the way. And I had just become the most important man on the base. My broken fix. My junkyard design. It was now officially the only thing keeping Fob Reaper alive.